Camaradas y compañeros, comrades all over the world. This conference has led us to the strategic historical experience and memories of the spirit of revolutionary socialists of Zimmerwald. It is such an honor to us to share this historical moment with you and stand all along with you in facing our dangerous and cynical moments. And here we have a representative of East Timor social life movement. Along with the Komite Esperansa from East Timor are Clube Estudante Progressivo, Movimento Resistência Social, Juventude Socialista Movere, Movimento Rosas Mel, Reabilitação Ecologia Nacional, Hermera Peasants Union, and Manifahi Peasants Union, and so on in here. Again, it is our privilege to speak on this historical day. 11 September marked the 200 days of US NATO war against Russia and its preparation for war against China. On the other, today also mark a decade of 9/11 or September attacks, a terrorist attack that means to us oppositely. That is for us the attack that resulted by the disease of the fundamentalism that was created by the virus of the Western liberalisms and imperialism. We are living in a time of historical chaos that follows in parallel with the obscurantist reaction and restoration. Before I move into the current Ukraine war, I would like to talk and discuss the central neglected questions on the historical development of our time. That is impasse. That is the name that responsible or the reflection of the structural crisis of the international communities for its absence in the current crisis and war. A question that has been raised by our friends and comrade Mike Gimbel in here. For us, our problem for decades is not only a crisis, but also an impasse. It was a situation characterized our tipsy world today, and in which many march forwardness always lead to march backwardness, and of course, to now here move, something like that. Impasse is a determinal point of our historical time. We found impasse is not a simple name or political grammatical expression, something like that. It is not simply equivalent to economist words such as stagnation. It is not only a transition or regression or finalism of particular conjuncture or epiphenomenon of crisis, not an extensive monstrosity, not either than the negation of any shift in the representation, but the existential normality in between the absence of emancipatory politics and globalized imperialist capitalism as such. Therefore, the contemporary conjuncture of global capitalism shows the overexpanding crisis produced under the impossible crisis of the system as a whole to the entire capitalist modernity. The crisis persists in its long downturn and decline because it is maintained throughout the prolonged crisis of impasse. It's not all the current regression and absence of emancipatory politics, prolonged downturn and the stagnation of global capitalism reflecting the deepening expansion of both entangled crisis and impasse in the normal function of capitalism as impassable system and crisis-prone contradictory system. We today witnessing the merging of two structural fields that permit a deep impasse of a crisis and a crisis of impasse, two of the situations that we face right now. The current situation implies the need to move beyond the dominant, unequivocal understanding of disorder of our system. The impasse now became the dominant axiomatic name of the contemporary conjuncture, perhaps an uncanny real that we must accept and to move beyond. The combined distinction with crisis conditioned the united between both reconstituted toward new substance of the system and the current representation. According to necessity of understanding this combined disorder and obscure substance that force us to rethink and rediscover the contemporary conjuncture in order to foment a new social imagination and experimentation of collective politics and dialectical coordination between the North and South, to rethink the struggle and capacity to mobilize the balance of force on international level that will lead us to transcend the global neoliberal financial capitalism and to move forward a long transition to a war socialism. Now let's go back to the war in Ukraine, the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine as a battlefield. For us, the war in Ukraine has a dual character in here. The first one is a national fascist counter-revolutionary, and the other one is imperialist war for profit against Russia and then to China. It is a fascist war that is reactive against the crisis, against the people, against the left, against Russia, and the preservation of the decadent system. While in another, it is an imperialist war of conquest of wealth and for the sake of accumulation, of profit, and of course, to empire building. Ukraine neoliberal fascism is the rightful enemy of the people, of the working masses, either in Ukraine, in Russia, in Europe, in US, in global South, on the national left, and so on. War and fascism in Ukraine are not simply the extension or the means of the bourgeoisie or monopoly capital violence against the working masses. Both are the essence of the expression of decay and disintegrated capitalisms, and the deep contradiction unfolding in our global imperialist capitalism. And for us, the fascism is a reactionary force directive toward a decadent system and disintegrated society. Its political and ideological function were to restore and protect the regime of profit, to safeguard the private property regime amidst the growing decadence and crisis. So here it leads to an important and provocative question over the national question of Ukraine in our current situation in war, which is our sectarian and our Puritan Western left, something like that, has committed to support this, to support the NATO narrative, to support the imperialist chessboard in here. First is that, are the Ukraine government or state are neutral in this situation? For us, there's a big no in here. And for us as a left, as a communist, and for the European left and the Northern left, something like that, our rule, our task is to expose the bourgeoisie, the dependent, the parasitic, the predatory character of the Ukrainian government and its fascistic elements, something like that. The Ukrainian national has completely filled the three triangulation character of 21st century fascism. It has a neoliberal reactionary power in the state, it has a fascist force in the civil society, and it has the fascist monopoly behind of it. So the second question is that, did the US and NATO fight for the Ukrainian freedom or independence? There's a big no again for this. Here again, the US and NATO fight for the liberation of the Russian wealth and resources to be able to privatize as what the Ukrainian government has done to IMF, to World Bank, to US imperialist riot, something like that. It ensured the natural and human resources to be able to be controlled by the North. It was a war that replaced the Ukrainian blood with the profit to the imperialist triad. Therefore, this fascist and imperialist counter-revolutionary war is a war that perpetrated a subjective and objective violence to the people of Ukraine, to entire global people. And the NATO, therefore, it was an imperialist war of geopolitical expansion to weakening and designed for regime change across the counter-hegemonic countries of Russia and China and movement of the East and South. This is a war to rebuild US global hegemony and nuclear supremacy. It's just another war preparation to counter a revolutionary war against China industrial market socialism, which is this a decade exceptional achievement resulted from the Chinese state and party political system known as democratic centralism. This war and militarism financed by us in the South, by the working masses in advanced capitalist nation, by the crucifixion of the vast mass of the global population. Before I jump to the end, I would like to propose some optimistic of the wheel here. So what is the progressive and non-progressive character of war in Ukraine? The non-progressive part of the war is that it aims, this is the non-progressive part. This aims at accumulation at war scale. This is how the militarism abroad was central to imperial global strategy of accumulation and hegemony, and a war as a means of preserving the stability of the system and hegemony. That is a unipolar super imperialism of US-led globalized neoliberal imperialist order. Consequently, it brings more suffering to the working people in global South countries. That is mean it is more pillaging, more austerity, more deep, and more transfer of wealth from south to north. The progressive part of the crisis and war initiated by the fascist imperialist aggression for our particular task in the 20th century is that this disease not only struck us, it does not only simply bring more deaths and suffering, but it helps dissolve the capitalist schizophrenia, inducing social confusion and impasse. It is with this that the idea and the tendency of the permanent Holocaust is not just simply a dystopia of the end of history where rational thought has claimed to have framed the society of late capitalism. What some has referred to super calamity, where the aggressive social inequality, misery, and pauperization, coupled with the worldwide ecological crisis, social inequality, pandemic, and potential nuclear war has approaching us in the so-called a period of return to normativity, as our beloved liberal and Democrats and right-winger has promised the masses. The imperialist proxy war in Ukraine, the US NATO war in Russia and China over Ukraine, and now Taiwan is traditional form of unjust war. The unjust war is non-progressive war. What is unjust war shall be responded with a just war by peace-loving countries. I think that's what Russia is doing and what China has to do. While in addition, fascist war backed by the imperialist North is a war to maintain what described as war to protect the evolution by within and continuity. An irrational move and action to safeguard the continuity of the impasse, of decadence, of moribund, of barbarism of our system. As Marxists and as communists in movements, our solidarity should be with all independent liberation movement and oppressed nation, and it should be equal to existing peace-loving countries that are facing the imperialist aggression and war for profits. To end, Marxism is a proletarian science. It is a science of the partisan, to take side, to look, to work, and struggle from the side of the unseen, of the oppressed and exploited class of people. So though the question of war, a war always provoked and initiated by the ruling established power, by the monopoly, by the capitalist state of the North. The objective reality since the rise of the era of capitalism is maintained along this objective law. The imperialist war is an unjust war that should be totally opposed by the people and any socio-political left. The Russian position is clear. It is to defend the Russian sovereignty and its people, to defend the oppressed people in Ukraine, of defensive war countering the cruel expansionist war for profit and fascist war of preserving the stability of the profit regime. Again, the current organic crisis in capitalism with the resurgence of right and authoritarian and populist reaction in power in many parts of the world, especially the North, again, will test the historical hypothesis to the return of popular revolt in many parts of the global South against the tyrannical return of the neo-fascists across the civil society, the reaction of far right in political power of the state, and the hegemony of monopoly capital with its transnational, corporate, and financialized variant. Again, the First and the Second World War has gave us the revolution and war across the world during the 20th century. And we are not afraid with the possible and consequence of war that will open a new horizon for national and international socialist revolution. That is why Mao Zedong said, first, we are against it. Second, we are not afraid of it. Comrades, we don't want war. It is an imperialist war that imposed to us, that forced the people to take arms and to fight. Down with war, down with imperialisms. La lucha continúa. Thank you.